There. So major breakthrough today that I had to share. I'm sure there's going to be more that comes in the program that I'm in now, but I just wanted to capture it because I don't know how much more is going to come up, and I just want to capture it as it comes along. So today I'm at the Timeless Wisdom Training Program for Thomas Hewell, who's a really powerful healer. I've worked with him. I brought him into Google. I was doing a number of things in terms of collective healing and running a number of different programs there, and then ended up joining his trauma-informed consulting and coaching 1-year program. And now I've joined the 2-year Timeless Wisdom Training Program. So we've only been here 2 days. And today what happened was, so what Thomas does is he opens it up to Q&A, and people will ask questions. And just to give you a little bit of background on him, and I've done that in a previous video, but I'm going to just recap it so that for those of you that haven't seen it, we'll have some context. But essentially, he talks a lot about the nervous system. So when anything that triggers our trauma or stresses us, our nervous system becomes activated, and we're in fight or flight. Our conscious mind shuts down, and we're like subconscious is running the show, but where our nervous system is activated. Well, that's contagious. So if someone is with you, or you're in the presence of someone, and your nervous system can also get activated if there's any resonant trauma in your system with theirs. So as they're getting stressed or activated, you can also get stressed and activated. And then if then it escalates, right? Because then you go into fight or flight and say something that you might regret, and then they say something, etc. Escalates. Unless one of you or both of you have the resources to ground or stay centered, essentially, so that it doesn't escalate. And what happens is this concept of co-regulation. So what the example that Thomas shares that I think is the most resonant is, imagine my son were to come to me and say, Mommy, I'm really scared. And I were to say, oh, there's nothing to be scared of, you're fine. I basically dismissed and discounted his emotion. He hasn't stopped being scared. He's just not going to tell me. Another way to respond would be to give him my full attention and say, I can feel how scared you are. Come here. And if he feels safe enough, he can, come close, and he can latch into my nervous system because I'm grounded, centered, and his is activated because he's scared, and he can co-regulate with me and ground. I can help him ground it out because he can latch into my nervous system. Then we can have a conversation about whatever he's scared about, because now his conscious mind has come back online, his thinking brain. So now he can have right? Because otherwise when the thinking brain shuts down the conscious mind, he's having an emotional response. So any logic I use, it's not even registering because the conscious mind is shut down. So the key is you meet them in their emotion, you co-regulate with them, let them ground it out, and then you can have a rational conversation because the conscious mind comes back online. So now you can speak logic and be able to have an actual conversation. So it's this concept of co-regulation. Well, what Thomas does, it's so powerful. I mean, he's done so much work. He went, I think, to a meditation retreat for 4 years. And then, he's done, obviously, this is obviously a destined thing here, but so he's really powerful. He's so grounded. He can co-regulate with like 1,000 people. So he works with communities that are survivors of Holocaust, genocide, slavery. So there's a lot of work that he does around the world in wars. He's a German individual that lives in Ukraine. He's married to a Jewish woman. So he's, immersed in it and doing a ton of like healing work around this. So essentially what happens is the most powerful parts of his program are when he opens it up to Q&A. So what happens, people are co-regulating with him just in his presence, and where he puts his awareness, are the folks that are co-regulating with him. And then, their trauma starts coming to the surface because they feel safe. So now their trauma starts coming to the surface. And what happens is the people that are the most traumatized typically are the ones that will come to the mic, and you can see panic, fear, terror often in their faces. And what he'll say is, he'll actually say, you might, can we go there? And he can feel in his system what they're feeling because his awareness is expanded. So it's basically like he's expanded self, and he's just healing, you could say, a resonant trauma in his system. But he's essentially able to, it's like one collective body. So he can feel it, and then he can help them ground it out, co-regulate with them. And what's amazing is whenever he does this, you see transformation happening instantaneously. So he shows you the vast intelligence of the response, like he empathizes, makes them feel safe, helps them see how this came from a childhood trauma or a past experience, how they're regressing to a younger version of themselves because the trauma's triggered. And then he's able to help them co-regulate and ground it out, heal. And so you see massive transformation. People who are sobbing, like terrified, angry, like calm, they start to smile, laugh, like center, I mean, it's phenomenal to watch. And what also happens is anyone in the room that has resonant trauma can also feel it. So what was happening for me, and it's been online and in person, and all of the programs I've been with him, I start feeling it and I start crying because I'm feeling so much in my system. And today what occurred to me was, this was happening. He had a couple people speak and it was so resonant. And the things that were really resonant for me, like, I mean, every time it's resonant, but this time something struck me. Because every time it was like, it didn't matter what they talked about, I would just feel it. It was like, wasn't even much about the content, I would just feel it. But what happened today that was a little bit different was, yes, last night and today was, so one woman who we went into the Q&A, she was talking about how when her eyes are open, she can't feel the other person. She couldn't feel Thomas. When her eyes are closed, she can feel herself, but she can't feel Thomas. So, and she said when her eyes are open, she feels like she has to take care of him. Like, so this was the pattern. And I was like, well, there's something about that that really resonated for me. Like, I noticed when I'm with people, or I'm like in the workplace or with people or anything, when I'm in these triads or in these one-on-ones, I kind of armor up. I don't feel myself even much, or the other person. So I was making note of this. And then when another person spoke today, and she spoke about how there was fear when he started, when he started to move towards her and was going to work with her. She was feeling all this fear come up. And one of the things he talked about that after she shared was that, and he was kind of helping her recognize and track what's happening live as she's starting to speak. But then what he was sharing was basically that, so if I say something that triggers you, and now you can't hear me anymore, maybe you've shut down. And then I notice that you're not picking up what I just said, or, it's not registering, or you didn't hear me, or I'm not getting any validation. But then what I might do is say why aren't you listening to me? Or get really upset inside that I don't feel validated, I don't feel valued, I'm not being heard or seen. So often what will be a natural response is to repeat myself, right? It's repeat it, or say it louder. And, it's like when you get to, it's causing a trigger in me, my own trauma. So now I'm disembodying, I'm responding, I'm going into fight or flight. So I'm let's say I go up into my head, which is a common phenomenon when you go into stress, you go up into the upper part of the body. And then because you're stressed here, you're disembodied, you can't feel anymore. You can't feel them and they can't feel you. So now you're even less likely for them to understand what you're saying, because there's no longer the feeling sense. So now it gets worse. I'm even less heard by the people that I'm speaking to. And I feel I need to effort more. I lean in further is the common pattern. And his point was, you got to stop and slow down and then see what's going on. And his point was that if you don't include the other person when you're speaking, you go from being very dependent, right? I'm leaning all the way in. I need you to validate me, to see me, for me to feel good about myself and not go into fight or flight. Well, I kind of probably am in fight or flight. But anyway, I need you to see me. That's codependency or dependency. Then it's or the other response is I lean out, right? It's I need my space, is what the example he was giving. Or, you kind of distance yourself from people, basically. So that's leaning out. You're independent. But what you really want to do to get to the ideal state is interdependence. So it's when I'm speaking, I'm not only feeling myself, I feel you. So I'm including you. And then speaking from that space. So I hear you and I feel you, but I'm able to distinguish and discern, what's mine, what's yours, and still speak, with both of us, kind of aware of both of us. So that's the ideal state. And I realized I don't know how to do that. So what he was showing the first woman who spoke yesterday, how to start practicing that live. And then the woman who spoke today, he talked about when the fear occurs, it's a fear of not being valued, not being seen. When somebody doesn't validate you or see you or respond to you, it's not being seen, and there's fear. That's scary. That can be an existential threat if it came from when you were a child or whenever the trauma occurred. And then as soon as I thought about it, yeah, it's fear. I'm armoring up like crazy, armoring up. And I suddenly started crying even more. And then I was sobbing at that point. I was in the middle of 200 people in the room. So they ended, and luckily they ended at the end of that for a break, and I immediately went to what they call the tea room, where there's basically coaches or therapists that have trained under Thomas that are available to help you process. So I went up, and I was still kind of like, you could tell I was in tears. So, I went with one of the therapists into one of the little rooms they have. And by then, I'd come back into my head. I got to feel it. I could feel it. I came back to my normal self. I wasn't feeling emotional. And I'm like, it's not here anymore. I think I'm good, is what I started thinking. And then like feeling and saying to her, like, it's not here anymore. She's like, well, why don't we just, sit down and see, like, why don't you tell me what happened? So I was sharing this dynamic. Like, whenever I get into triads and one-on-ones, whenever I'm speaking to people, I armor up, I realize, and it's fear. There's some fear in there that I was like, only when Thomas is doing the Q&A do I touch it and feel it a little bit. And I said, and I want to go there, but I don't know how to go there. And I don't know what this is. And so I was like, they're trying to feel into it, couldn't feel it, but still like feeling her presence, and I couldn't do it. Then she was just like, she started sharing with me, like kind of reflecting back what she was sensing. And then suddenly I felt like her care. And Thomas talked about this concept of intimacy. Even the word had a stigma for me, like almost like a darkness to it. Like intimacy is like, it's almost like it's a word I don't like. It feels like an invasion of privacy, or like something that shouldn't be discussed in public. Like, and what he was like, any closeness and depth of connection is intimacy. And what was interesting, so I was telling her this, and then I suddenly could feel something. I suddenly started feeling something, and I immediately touched that spot within me, in my gut, and I started sobbing, like, and I didn't have to hold back because I wasn't in a public setting. I was just sobbing and part of me was like, I felt like terror and fear, and I wanted to shut it down quickly. But then a part of me was like, I want to get rid of this. I want to tap into it. I want to let it flow. So I was kind of like struggling with this. And then after a few seconds, I like calmed myself. Suddenly I felt joy, like all this joy at the bottom of that like pile. And what she said was, she's like, I can feel like this sweet childlike joy. Like, it's so sweet. And then I was like, wow, I want to go back. And I tried, couldn't go. As soon as I tried, like disappeared. And I was like, I'm trying too hard. So then again, I tried to relax into it and try to feel her and her care, or her like focus. And again, I was able to like get in there. And then it was another round of like sobbing. And then again, I came back to joy. And I was like, wow, like this is what I want to do. I want to be able to do this all the time. So I left, and I got into another triad. They had us break into another triad. And the questions that they were asking was like, before we went into the triad, was like, what was home for you? How do you think of home when you were young, when you were little? What's home now? What's an image that would capture it or something? And interestingly, when I started writing it down, I was writing down, like, for some reason, like, it was like competition, cold, like no affection, like alone. That was another word that came up. And I actually started feeling emotion. I started like feeling like I started crying. And then he was like, I want you to say what home is now. And I got like distracted. Didn't even do the exercise. And I realized later that was kind of a way of shutting down. But then when I went to the triad, we each had 15 minutes, and I was telling my other two, group members that this was something I was working with, and that there's something about being seen that makes me go armor up. So I wanted to play with that. So I was trying to feel into it and try to like soften into it, and try to like, even with my eyes closed, I couldn't do it. With my eyes open, I tried to see them and feel them and try to like soften. And I was able to soften a little bit, but I couldn't touch that fear. And then interestingly, like when I ended it, and then, and their gaze turned away, and they like, had quite closed their eyes. That's when it started, like I started feeling shaking. And I started feeling like a convulsing, like my belly started convulsing, and it was like a rumbling volcano. That's what I felt even when I was in the tea room. This rumbling volcano that was going to erupt. It was so overwhelming. I didn't feel that level of overwhelm, but I started feeling it rumble when I was in the triad. And then it went away. As soon as I tried to focus on it, it went away. And I tried again in another triad that I was with, and it was with a close friend of mine. And then the other woman that was with, it was like, felt like a really safe space. And then again, I was telling them how I really wanted to like be able to feel comfortable and safe enough to go to this thing. So I tried and I couldn't do it. And then one of them suggested, like, maybe we should turn away from you. So we're still in your, have presence in you, but we're not looking at you. So they both did that. They're really sweet. And my body started convulsing again, started shaking. And I started feeling the edges of the rumbling. But then as soon as I tried to focus on it, everything went numb. My whole body went numb. And then I'm like, it's not working. And they like came back. And then when each of them were sharing, I started sobbing, and it would be particular words that would trigger it. Like, I remember when I heard like alone or loneliness, it would trigger it. When I heard hope and light, it triggered it. It was like sadness, deep, deep sadness is what I was touching, similar to when I was in the psychedelic journey with Santa Daimi. And on the third day, it's called, I forget the name of Teetering on the Edge of Insanity. That's when I'd gone to my second chakra, same place. And I thought it was ancestral trauma. And when I touched it, I touched deep sadness, overwhelming sadness, where I was sobbing, and my body was shaking, pretty insanely intense. Terror and that kind of fear and stuff, it's not in my vernacular. It's not my day-to-day experience because I armor the hell up. So I don't ever feel it. I'm so far from it. And I realize most of the environments I'm in, including at home, I armor up. There's moments, like the only moment I could think of was like when I was dropping my older son at school in college. I wasn't sure if I was even going to cry, because again, in public settings or around people, I can't tap into that easily at all. But weirdly enough, when I was in the parking lot, we were about to get in the car, and I was giving one last hug, and it was like a switch turning. I immediately started sobbing, like it was completely unfamiliar, like this was. It felt totally alien, that sensation. But this time it was like terror, it was sadness, it was fear, this like trembling and shaking in my body. So man, there is one hell of a knot or trauma that's like in my gut, in my second chakra, in my belly, or in my womb, who knows? But it's like big. And what occurred to me today is, one of the things Thomas says is that if there's, someone who has resonant trauma to them, you'll feel it in your system, right? And then you can both. So most people feel one or two people or like someone. I'm feeling every single person that speaks. So does that mean I have like motherload of trauma? I don't know. What I'm going to do is my hope and goal is to volunteer to a Q&A tomorrow. Until this point, I've always wanted to kind of raise my hand, but I was like, I don't have anything. I don't have any major capital T trauma. I mean, I've always said I've never had capital T trauma. And I believe I'm just drawn to all this trauma healing and alternative healing to help other people. But maybe not. Maybe there's some crazy trauma that I blocked out. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. Who knows? So I'm curious to get to the bottom of it. I believe it's going to happen. We're here for another 6 days. And this is only on day 2 right now. So my hope is tomorrow I'm going to try to volunteer and see if I can work with Thomas to tap into the deepest fear that I've ever known. Stay tuned.